We are going to go ahead and get started, and I will start off by just sharing a little bit about the agenda and also my name. And I'm going to introduce a few of the other folks who you'll hear from this morning. And so my name is Patty Diaz-Andrade. I am the Chief Impact Officer here at OneGoal, and I have been with OneGoal for about 6.5 years. I joined OneGoal at a time when we were expanding by essentially replicating our regional model. If you're familiar with OneGoal Chicago, in Chicago, we have been around for about 12 years, and we've done work largely with a regional team that has boots on the ground and is delivering our classroom model. And about 3.5 years ago, and by the way, I did that in Massachusetts, but about 3.5 years ago as an organization, we realized that when you look at cities like Chicago, there is enormous need outside of those cities, right? And across states like Illinois. And the need is not just to deliver programs to students, but also to support you, district school administrators, counselors, in your ability to deliver equitable post-secondary success. And so it was around that time that we stood up a new team to do this work. And you're gonna get to hear from one of our partners and also learn a little bit about what this partnership with them has looked like and how this then has led to this partnership with ISBE. And so I'm excited to be able to tell you that. A little bit of housekeeping. Here is the phone number for dialing into Zoom in case you have some connectivity issues, which I know have been a challenge for folks lately. And so happy to have you dial in if it turns out that the internet gets a little bit funky for you. Please ask questions in the Q&A. We've got folks on the OneGoal side who will be monitoring the chat and will be letting us know if there are questions that bubble up. We're also recording this webinar, and that's largely because there are folks who want to make it but cannot, and so we want to make sure that we make this webinar available. Make sure that you access the application form if you haven't already, and our team will put that in the chat throughout today's webinar so that you have access to it, but we'll also send it as a follow-up in case you're interested. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Here are some objectives for today's webinar. We, number one, want to review with you the Post-Secondary Leadership Series, which is the primary product and offering that we are working with ISBE to deliver and make accessible to you, to districts across the state. Second, we want to explain what you can expect as a partner. So that will largely come through our work with Elgin U46. We have colleagues who are joining us who will tell you what their experience has been working with us over the past 1.5 years. And then we'll just walk through some logistics around the application and the timeline to make sure that you have what you need if you're interested in partnering with us and in working with us. Obviously, we want to make this a discussion. And so as I mentioned earlier, please type into the chat, ask us questions, but also we will reserve time at the end to make sure that we're able to answer those questions for you. So with that, I'm going to jump right in, and the first thing I'll do is introduce Jennifer Kirmes, who is a partner, an ally, a friend to OneGoal, and has been really instrumental along with others at ISBE to help us move this work forward. Jennifer is the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning at ISBE, and I will toss it over to her to frame up a little bit about why, from ISBE's perspective, this partnership with OneGoal is really exciting.
Great, thank you, Patty, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the State Board of Education, I'm thrilled to be here this morning to just lend the State Board's perspective and support for this program. As we took a look as a state, along with the P20 Council and many sister agencies and the Governor's Office, at the impact that COVID has already had on our school systems, one of the most striking and immediate impacts was the decline in post-secondary enrollment that occurred, immediately at the onset of the pandemic and has continued as the pandemic has progressed. And so we knew that as part of the work that we do specific to responding to the impacts of COVID, we wanted to use some of our federal resources to provide additional supports and resources, particularly to school districts that serve high school students, to ensure that really high quality, thoughtful, data-oriented post-secondary planning and preparation could happen for our students who had their education so disrupted by the experiences that we've all been through these past years. And so we were really looking for a partner that had demonstrated a history of really dramatic and impressive results, and one that we thought would be able to meet Illinois districts where they are and deliver really sort of unique and tailored supports to each and every district partner to really, again, to meet their needs and to meet the needs of the students. And so, and then lastly, we were really looking for a partner that we thought would build sustainable practices. We know that that post-secondary work is complicated. It's especially difficult for students who have historically been excluded from the higher education system, and for communities that have fewer resources and less of a track record of being able to provide access to post-secondary education for their students. And so wanted to make sure that we were leveraging these one-time dollars in a way that would have an immediate impact on the students in the schools now, and also build sustainable practices so that we can continue to have a positive impact in the long run, even though this is a one-time investment opportunity. So really, those are sort of all of the reasons that we focused on this partnership with OneGoal. But ultimately, it comes down to addressing these big sort of reddish orange numbers here that you see on the slide. We know we don't have enough support in high schools to give students the kinds of attention that we would want to help them make the best post-secondary choices for them and their families, whatever those are. We know that there are huge disparities and gaps in this space. And we also know that COVID has had an impact, and we need to try to address that. I think there's one more slide here, right? So on this slide, I really just want to say that this partnership is rooted in equity. I just want to say that explicitly, that as we constructed the design for this program and the partnership and identified the districts with whom we really want to partner, this program is about ensuring that students across the entire state, in every school district that serves high school students, have access to these opportunities, and that schools have the resources and supports that they need to support their students and their families in turn through this process. And so we're so thrilled to have found a partner in OneGoal that shares just a really deep commitment to equity and is willing to work with us across our entire state to give everybody the kinds of supports that they need.
Thank you so much, Jen. You know, I think I speak for the entire OneGoal team when we say we're equally honored and humbled, really, to be able to work with you all and to contribute to the ongoing efforts that I know many on this webinar are already pursuing to ensure that all young people have access to post-secondary success. With that, I think you really teed us up, Jen, for this question that we have for you all, which is what gets in the way? What has been maybe a challenge that you face in supporting students' post-secondary pathways? And you'll see this pop up in your window. So we'd love to hear, and we gave you some that we know, a lot of folks share, but if you have others that you want to add, please feel free to add them. Great. So I'm seeing a lot of affirmation for the ones that we know are real: a lack of time, mindsets, resources, a few on the other. And if you all wouldn't mind, for those of you who are adding other, putting it in the chat, what would you add to this list, just to put it out into the space? Thank you, Jason, for that note. Okay, so a lot of affirmation, right? Lack of time, resources, mindset shift. And we agree with you that these are the things that often get in the way. And so hopefully through this webinar, you'll get to see the ways in which we try to tackle some of these challenges and support you in tackling them. So I'm going to jump right in and give you a little bit of an overview of who is on this call. You just heard from Jen. There are other folks on this call that you'll hear from. So I just shared with you who I am, Chief Impact Officer at OneGoal. I'm also joined by my colleague, Andy Schmitz, who's the Managing Director of Secondary Partnerships at OneGoal and is really overseeing a lot of our work, most of our work with the ISBE partnership, and has been doing an incredible job over the past year and a half in working with our two other guests, Alexa Charsha and Michelle Chapman, who are a part of our Elgin U46 district partnership work. Alexa is the lead counselor in Elgin U46, and she will share with you some of the experiences that they have had over the past year and a half, and hopefully share with you best practices and knowledge about what this work looks like at scale. I'm going to start off by just rooting us in what it is that this partnership is. So at OneGoal, we offer a flexible, impactful partnership that meets your school and district's diverse needs so that you can equitably support all of your students, right? And so what does that tactically look like? It looks like a dual track strategy where we are effectively working with you to do two things. One is to build the capacity of adults in the system. And we use that term adults intentionally because this isn't just about counselors. This isn't just about teachers. This is about every adult in a school, in a district, seeing their role in supporting young people into post-secondary success and readiness. The idea there is that because adults who sit at the district and school leadership levels play a significant role in creating the enabling conditions to then support young people, those adults need coaching. They need one-on-one coaching and support that helps them understand what those system levers are that could dramatically transform post-secondary outcomes for young people. In addition to that post-secondary leadership coaching and support, we have a classroom-based model. And that is a model that if you are familiar with our Chicago work, you've probably come to understand as connected to OneGoal. That model is classroom-based and it is student-facing. It is essentially curriculum that is delivered during junior and senior year of a high school, and that then continues even after a young person has graduated from high school so that they are receiving intensive support in that first year of post-secondary. These two pieces, right, both supporting adults in the system to think more strategically and holistically about post-secondary strategy and the student-facing curriculum, we believe, lead to the type of transformation and change that really improves post-secondary outcomes in communities. And so for the first one, the first component, the post-secondary leadership series, has three key parts. And we're starting there because this partnership starts with that piece, that first track, the post-secondary leadership series. And so the three pieces of this support are assess, assemble, and advance. And in assess, essentially what we're doing is we are working with your district team to evaluate your post-secondary strategy against a rubric that we have developed and designed and has been endorsed by NCAN and is focused on these 7 areas. And so that rubric asks you and your leadership team to consider how effectively you are leveraging, for example, post-secondary data to think about what opportunities and challenges there are for supporting young people. This rubric also asks you to think about how you think about continuous improvement cycles in relation to post-secondary success and how you're connecting that data, how you're connecting, sort of the resources that you have available to ensure that as a system, you are seeing the type of transformative change that will lead to improved student outcomes. That assessment is done in collaboration with a OneGoal coach. This is a coach that you receive as part of the professional learning series or leadership series. And that coach is working with you to take that assessment, to take sort of the results of this rubric that we complete with you, and then start to advance the work, right? You are engaging with this coach through a customized coaching plan that is helping you understand how you set tactical goals in relation to where you want to be, and ensure that you're progress monitoring, that you're understanding what are the changes that we need to make in the next 1 year, in the next 2 years, to ensure that we're on track to more effectively supporting young people. Our hope is that one of those strategies, right, will be adopting a more intrusive intervention like our classroom model. And so many of the districts that have been accepted into the program already, which we're happy to tell you about in a minute, will begin the classroom model in the fall of 2022, because they are right now already beginning the coaching experience with our leadership coaches and are in the process of completing that internal assessment as a first step. Beyond that, and this is, I think, probably one of the most exciting pieces of the professional learning series, is that you become a part of a cross-district community of practice. And so that leadership coach that you're working with is not just working with your district team. That person is also working with several other district teams that have a lot of similarities with your own district, and whose opportunities and challenges are relevant to you. And so that idea of really ensuring that we are building best practices, that we are sharing knowledge across districts, and that we are using all available data, right? Both the qualitative information that you're going to get from being a part of this cross-district community of practice, but more tactically, the quantitative analytic reports that you get through GuideEd and an equity analysis. All of that is helping you think much more robustly about the type of post-secondary strategy that your community is capable of implementing and pursuing, and ultimately succeeding at. And so those are the three pieces. Here's sort of a visual representation of how they come together. Again, we sort of begin with the initial assessment with our rubric, and then this notion of getting them personalized monthly coaching and being a part of that community of practice that is receiving professional development. Those sort of work together with these analytic reports that are part of GuideEd, which we can also tell you more about, really infusing that work with real-time analytics that comes through your district data and a connection to the National Student Clearinghouse data. I shared a lot, and I'm sure that you have a million questions related to the professional development series, and I want us to dig into that. But before I do that, I think what would be helpful to you all is to hear, well, what does this look like, right? Like, what does it look like on the ground when a district is engaging with OneGoal across these dimensions? And so with that, what I'll do is toss it over to Alexa, who can share with you from the perspective of Elgin U46, what this partnership has been like. So welcome, Alexa. We're excited to hear from you.
Thank you. Again, I'm the lead counselor for U46 in Elgin. I work very closely with our director of post-secondary success, Michelle Chapman. So we've both been working with OneGoal, and specifically Andy, over the last 2 years now. A little bit about us. I don't know who's in charge of the slides, but we are a pretty large district. We have 5 comprehensive high schools, and as well as 2 alternative high schools that we work with. We are pre-K through 12th grade. And as you can see, we have a student body of over 37,000. Many of our students qualify for free reduced lunch. We have a third of our students are English learners, and a majority of our students identify as Hispanic. As we move on to the next slide, some of the structures that we've, is there one in between there? Yeah. As we've started this work, so a little context, Michelle and I came into these roles about 3 years ago to really start looking at our post-secondary work. So Michelle and I both sit at the district level. We work with our local community college to work on dual credit partnerships and providing work-based learning. And then we also work with OneGoal in Andy. And so we have one school that piloted the classroom model this year, and we'll be continuing to do that next year. And then Michelle and I lead a district-wide post-secondary team. So we have teams from each of our high schools that consist of teachers, administrators, counselors, and we meet with those teams the beginning of the school year, end of the school year, and then on a quarterly basis in between. Each of those teams meets at their own high school on a regular basis. Some of them are bi-weekly, some of them are every 3 weeks, just depending on the time of the school year. They set up those meetings on their own, and those teams are led by an administrator as well as a either counselor or a teacher. So we have a union member in there who are leading those teams. In between that, Michelle and I meet with those team leaders to kind of check in, see how the work is going, you know, really provide any support along the way. We meet with Andy monthly, and I will say that that's been really helpful for us. I know that we've all had a very busy year, 2 years, and what's been really great about that is it's forced us in a way to kind of take a minute to slow down and refocus ourselves and make sure that we're looking at our post-secondary work and it's not getting put to the wayside. So Andy always provides support as far as resources, but also really asking some, you know, questions to push our thinking and help us look at, you know, how can we push our teams so that we're moving to the next level and really supporting our students in our buildings. We also look to offer professional development. We work with our post-secondary teams to cross-share between schools, what's working, what's not, making sure that we're looking at data in between, really providing new learning too, you know. I think, again, with being so busy that sometimes that professional development gets kind of thrown to the side. So we try and make sure that we're always incorporating that with our school teams. And really looking at, you know, I think back to Patty's point, we want everyone in a building to see this as part of their position, right? And we want everyone to look at how they're helping students, and regardless of if they're a teacher and administrator, maybe they're not the person sitting right in that, you know, counselor seat, but how is everyone playing a role in supporting our students? So some things that really helped us to prioritize at the beginning, we looked at student feedback. We conduct a survey at the end of every year. We use the 5 essentials data, and we were hearing from students that maybe they didn't feel like teachers were really supporting them with post-secondary planning, or that they were playing a role in that. They weren't feeling that they were being encouraged to go to college. We looked at that enrollment data. We saw that we didn't have as many students enrolling in, you know, 2 or 4 year schools, and that there's a huge disparity between some of our high priority groups. And then really just, you know, we are a bigger district. We have multiple high schools, and there was a lack of consistency across all of our schools and how students were being supported and to what extent they were being supported. So that's really helped us kind of ground our work and figure out where we want to go with our post-secondary efforts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexa. And before I transition out, and we'll talk a little bit about timeline and open it up for Q&A, would love to hear from you, Alexa. Over the past 1.5 years, what have you seen from a district-wide system or like district-wide strategy has had the most impact on your vision for post-secondary success?
Yeah, and I would really say, honestly, it's putting that idea that post-secondary work is important for all of us, and it's a priority. You know, we didn't have post-secondary teams before we started this work. We didn't have anybody. Obviously, counselors were talking to students about this, but it was limited to the counselor's office. There's been a lot more of a school-wide effort to let students know what their options are after high school and really support them in how do they get to whatever their goal is after high school. And really incorporating, you know, now we have counselors and post-secondary teams doing PDs for the rest of their school to get everyone on board and help them, you know, make sure that we're all using the same language and that we're all supporting students in the same way.
Yeah, that shared responsibility is just so critical. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Alexa. And I'm sure the group will have questions for you. here's a, oh, I'm sorry. This is another slide that you had, which for some reason I think I missed. Alexa, forgive me.
Well, I think that's kind of talks to some of the spoke about anyway, so that was perfect.
Okay, good, awesome. So for those of us who are on the webinar and are probably thinking, well, you know, what's the timeline? When can I learn more or become a partner to OneGoal? So the first thing we'll share is that we ran an initial application cycle and have already secured partnerships with about 20 districts. And so we're excited that those partnerships have launched. And they're probably folks that you know and peers in your space. And so happy to share that information with you all. And so now we're looking to expand that and to add another group of additional districts that might be excited about this work and that would be a great fit. And so here's a general timeline that you can orient around. Really right now we're in the process of essentially gathering you know, applications. And so if you are interested in partnering with us, that application that I mentioned earlier that will pop in the chat is probably a first step. From there, our team will connect with you to just better understand your hopes for this partnership and ensure that there's alignment. And our goal would be that we launch this work in January, so that at the start of January, you're assigned your coach, you start the monthly coaching sessions. And as I mentioned earlier, we do that initial rubric training and assessment so that we have a clear understanding of where we are and what our desired state is. And so this gives you a sense for what that timeline looks like. And then for those of you who are curious, you know, obviously Jen mentioned earlier that through this partnership, there is no cost to this initial cohort of districts. However, it is important that we share with you that the cost of the leadership series is about $35,000 per district per school year. And for this first 2 years, as mentioned, this will be funded through the ESSER work, through the ESSER sort of funding stream that Jen mentioned earlier. After these first 2 years, what we've seen in our other district partners is that folks typically leverage Title I, Title II, or funding or local philanthropy. And so that is something that we are happy to discuss with you as we engage in this partnership to ensure that this partnership truly is a multi-year partnership that supports your team's efforts over the long term. Because ultimately, right, it does take time for the type of system transformation that we want to see. And so that's important for us to consider as we enter this partnership. Here's just a sense, this application deadline is should say December 22nd. And so apologies that it says November, but the application deadline for this next round is December 22nd. And so please be sure to submit that by then and reach out if you have any questions. And with that, here's just a closing quote that we thought could be relevant and you know, I think really speaks to our desire to work with each of you. But let me pause there and ask for any questions. Are there any questions that you all might have? And I'm gonna pop the chat. Same cost, no matter size. That's accurate, Kelly. Okay. Kelly, you said, so this is not designed for small districts. Can you share a little bit more about what you mean by that? And you can come off mute if you like. I will say that our intention is that this is designed for any size district. And so if there's something about what we shared that leads you to believe that that's not the case, then we'd love to hear from you.
And Kelly, I'll just name that a number of the 20 districts that Patty mentioned are smaller districts that exist all across the state. And that was our intention in this partnership, is to not serve any one size of district or any one profile, but make sure we're serving different types of districts equitably, whether that's a district that has, 1 high school and 300 kids, or a district like Alexa's that has, 5 or 6 high schools and more students than that.
Okay, we have a couple of comments in the chat, so let me try to work through them. Kristen, you offered a perspective on this very topic, which is that maybe look at a price per student. Yes, we only have 360 students. No way we can afford this either. Other companies similar to yours offer a per student price. really good push for us, Kristen and Kelly, and it's something that we can definitely take back. But I would encourage us to maybe have a conversation to think about what a long-term plan might look like for sustainability of the work. And we can get super creative in what that might look like. And to Andy's point, we've seen this work in other smaller districts and probably could think with you about what that might look like. There was another question on the length of the application. I would say it's medium. We ask you for some basic information about the key stakeholders involved. So we want to know who in your district is either involved or leads post-secondary success work. And then we want to understand what's happening now. What's your vision? Where are you seeing real promises or promising practices? And where are you seeing challenges that you really want to address? And we ask you a few questions around demographics so that we understand sort of the scale and the scope of the work that we would be partnering with you to do. There was also another question around whether the PowerPoint would be sent with the recording. Yes, we will send you that information that you have it. And then a question around the cost would be per district, even for a SPED co-op. I think the answer to that is yes, but Jen, or do you have a thought there?
Yeah, I think we would need to engage in further discussion about how this might work for a special education co-op or, or another sort of entity that operates in this space, but maybe is not like a traditional LEA or school district. I would also just add a couple of things to this conversation around district size, which is that just a reminder that, this is a dual track approach, and the post-secondary leadership series is work that is meant for the adults in the district to build the capacity of adults to improve outcomes for students. And so I also, as somebody who took a really close look at all of the possible entities, organizations and options in this space, I would actually argue that there aren't any companies that are the equivalent of OneGoal. And so there are certainly other actors in the post-secondary support space, but I think that it is our perspective that the value of what you will get in terms of really transformational change is pretty unique with this program, and we wouldn't have selected it otherwise. So again, at least initially, the target audience here is the adults in the district, which I fully understand that a smaller district with fewer young people also has fewer adults, but I do think the level of support and the amount of attention, time, and coaching, it certainly looks different in every place, but I think that hopefully helps sort of put into perspective why why this is structured the way that it is, at least initially. But as Patty said, we could certainly also engage in part of that conversation about if that's something we do want to take a look at. Maybe we haven't hit on the right model, or maybe we need to have more discussion with other districts. And then the last thing I do want to note, there was a slide that had like an orange circle on it that said that this work also gives administrators or individuals with administrative licenses the Administrator Academy credit. And I just wanted to name that out loud as a former administrator. I can't see who all, or I guess I can see actually who all is on. I just haven't taken a look, but I imagine that many of you are folks who have administrative licenses like I do. And sometimes we get so busy in the work that it's hard to remember to keep up with those Administrator Academy credits that you need to renew your license. And so, so I think this is a pretty nice opportunity to get credit for work that is actually just doing the work that you need to do to support your district. It's not like an extra thing you have to do or remember to do.
Thanks for pointing that out, Jen. Super important tidbit for folks to walk away with. A few other questions have come in the chat. I saw someone come
Patty,
up.
let me just jump in for one thing, and I might just ask Alexa, because I saw this question come up, about how long did it take you to complete the application, since I know you recently completed it?
45 minutes.
Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Sarah, on this question of co-ops, I would say reach out to us. We can talk to you about what that might look like, and we're happy to explore that with you. There was a question here from Kelly. This is not a $35,000 a year unless you need to train a new person. No, it is $35,000 a year. So the cost of the Professional Leadership Series program is $35,000 a year. So let me know if there was something about that wasn't clear. Happy to follow up. And then there's a question about how many of our districts are also AVID districts. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know, Andy, if you know, but I will tell you that we have worked in districts and in schools where AVID is present, and the work is very complementary. What we have heard from our school leaders is that our approach tends to be a bit more expansive in that we aren't just moving students along into the four-year university continuum, but actually that we're working with young people who maybe are on a path to a market relevant credential, right, and certification. And so that diversity and support to students is something that I would say distinguishes OneGoal, in addition to the fact that we're not just coaching and working with what would be the equivalent of an AVID teacher, but we're actually taking a more system level approach and saying, let's pull up and think about the role of district and school leaders in influencing this work. And Alexa, if you're familiar with them, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, we're an AVID district. And so, you know, for us, I kind of to Patty's point, I think OneGoal, our partnership with OneGoal has been a lot more broad, and that professional development piece of it has really reached more, you know, counselors, staff within the school, rather than, again, just looking at like the AVID teacher, that AVID classroom, and that segment of students. So it's allowed us to kind of expand some of our ideas and our work to touch more students along the way.
Keep the questions coming. I know others questions have come in, which is, will these meetings be in person or virtual? So they will be a mix, but I know, and Andy, you could probably speak to this, the very first meeting is typically in person for us, because we believe that those in-person relationships are very critical to launching. But Andy, do you want to add anything there?
Just say we work with district leaders and school leaders to make sure we're in line with what you all are most comfortable with, and any protocols that you have regarding visitors, especially around COVID. But as Patty mentioned, you know, we want to make the trip to get to know you in person, and so hopefully can prioritize some in-person conversations for both our partnership launch meeting and some of that early needs assessment work.
Alexa, I'll ask you one more question, just because I know, you know, folks who are on the webinar really just want to hear from folks like you who have the experience of partnering with us. What recommendations might you give folks on how to leverage an external partner like a OneGoal partner to support this work?
We try our very hardest to come into our meetings with Andy to be prepared with some questions that we know we'll get like great feedback about, you know. So we spend, you know, roughly an hour with him a month. And when we come into those meetings with things that we're already looking for feedback on, or already looking for additional resources, or, you know, it's a nice space for us to say, like, our last, you know, big meeting that we had, this kind of went way off course that we weren't planning on, and kind of already have any idea of what we're looking for has been really helpful when we're working with Andy. And I know that we don't always have time. There's been meetings where, you know, we walk in with Andy and say, like, I'm sorry, we're just coming here fresh-minded about this. But, you know, the more prepared to like really use that resource, I think makes it, you know, more fun.
Yeah. All right. Final call for any questions you all might have. Vince, you're asking for clarity on the cost of the program. That is correct. It's $35,000 per year. And through this ISBE partnership, this initial group of cohorts would not have to pay that because it would be covered by ISBE.
And just to name this, would be covered for this year and for next year as well. So it would cover the post-secondary leadership series, the work that Alexa just described this year, starting in January through summer of 2023. And for interested districts, it would also cover an inaugural cohort of juniors, and then when they become seniors for our classroom model, if that's something that a district felt like was a good fit.
Andy, this is Marcy. I guess one question would be it's not required that they would do a third year. I'm hoping that people aren't confused about that, you know, that this is something after 2 years, if they feel they wanted to continue it, they can.
That's right. If in July of 2023, a district says to us, we're not interested in continuing to partner with you, that's completely fine, and we respect that. If a district says we are interested in continuing to partner with you because we think we've started some of this work, but we want to talk about how to make this even more sustainable, then that's where some of the costs we talked about would come into play. But again, completely optional and up to a district to make that decision in the summer of 2023.
I also see Kelly's most recent question in the chat. Can you share experiences you have working with small high schools with a single counselor? And so I'm gonna like switch hats for a second. So I currently am the executive director of teaching and learning at ISBE. But before that, I was the principal of a high school that had, depending on the year, between 175 and 250 students in the high school grades. It was a middle school and a high school together. And so we at best had one counselor. Sometimes we had a person who was a counselor who was also teaching some classes when that was necessary. And so we did at that school implement OneGoal. Not in this same structure because it was a while back, and so it was the classroom model, the student-facing model. But I would say that even the professional development and support that that the OneGoal teachers and that the counselor, full-time or part-time, got through that process was really meaningful to us and made a big difference in terms of the level of support we were able to provide for students. But more importantly, I think for us, the level of the like organizational systems and the way that we used information and data in a much more intensive and real-time fashion to ensure that we were treating all of our students equitably. It was a school that was, I think, pretty close to 100% students of color, pretty close to 100% low income. You know, we use the community eligibility provision, so everyone ate breakfast and lunch for free. And so I will just say that personally, I am not from a large school district. I have worked in CPS, but also then in this smaller district that was literally just a middle and high school together, one building, one school. And so, you know, I have seen the program work in both places, and it does look different, and it is a different level of commitment and investment, but we do think that it is important for all of our schools in Illinois to know that this is an option and to think about how we can support you through it. So I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to even talk with you more offline about kinds of the specific ways that our systems and structures were able to shift and change to leverage there was a very small group of people working on this because we, you know, only had about 20 or 30 people, adults in the building to begin with. So.
Thank you, Jen. Folks, we have one last poll for you in addition to some information that you can take as far as the next step. So we'll ask you this question of your interest in connecting with us, and you'll see that pop up in your screen. So take a moment to just let us know. Thank you. I'll give it maybe 5 more seconds. And so the next slide is just, you know, some information, a QR code, a set of QR codes, if you're interested in either applying and getting access to the application or scheduling a meeting with us to talk about what this might look like. Happy to do either. And really excited to hear from you all. Let me just again thank Jen and Marcy, who have been such critical allies to us as we've sought to bring this program across the state to districts like yours, and really couldn't have done this work without you all. And so thank you. And thank you, Alexa, for joining us and sharing your experience working with us at Elgin. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll hang out here in case anybody wants to continue to ask questions in the chat, but otherwise we hope to hear from you. Vince, that is correct. If you decide to continue to partner and work with us after the 2-year partnership with ISBE, then we would have a discussion with you about that cost. But for this year and the next academic year, the cost of partnership is covered by ISBE. And then, yep, go ahead. Somebody was gonna say something. Kelly, is everyone who applies accepted? For the most part, we have seen high levels of acceptance, and it's largely because the folks who are submitting the application, you know, are fitting some demographic and need sort of based criteria that we know are necessary. And they have expressed some pretty deep commitment to the partnership. And so the folks who are taking the step to submit the application are already sort of on the path to doing a lot of this work. And so many of the folks who have submitted, we've accepted. And Connie, yes, we are recording this. And so we'll again send that out so that you have it and you can review it. All right, well, you know where to find us. Where can we find it? The application. So Connie, if you follow the link that we put just now in the chat, it should take you to a landing page on the OneGoal site that there's a PDF version link, and you can also get started by selecting your district. And so you see that link, onegoalgraduation.org/ISBE. But if you can't find it, then Alexander, would you mind putting your email so they can email you directly? I'll just add it. Okay, well, thank you everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Please reach out if you have any questions.